The morning sun cast long shadows across the pristine waters of Willowbrook Marina as Marcus Thompson cast his line into the lake. The gentle ripples disturbed the perfect reflection of million-dollar homes that lined the shore like silent sentinels. This wasn't just any fishing spot. This was his sanctuary, his escape from a world that had never quite accepted a black man in their exclusive neighborhood. The peace shattered like glass when a golf cart screeched to a halt behind him. "Excuse me, you cannot fish here." The voice belonged to Patricia Wellington, the self-appointed queen of the Willowbrook Homeowners Association. Her perfectly manicured nails gripped a clipboard like a weapon, her face twisted with the kind of indignation reserved for those who believed rules applied differently to different people. Marcus didn't turn around immediately. He'd heard that tone before, sharp, entitled, dripping with the assumption that he didn't belong. The same tone he'd encountered at country clubs, corporate boardrooms, and now, apparently, at a public marina. "Ma'am, this is a public fishing area," Marcus replied calmly, his voice carrying the measured patience of someone who'd fought this battle before. "I have every right to be here." Patricia's laugh was bitter as winter wind. "Not anymore. The HOA just passed Ordinance 247. No fishing from the marina docks between sunrise and sunset. It's unsightly." The word hung in the air like poison. Unsightly. Marcus finally turned around, his dark eyes meeting Patricia's pale blue ones. In that moment, something passed between them. A recognition of war being declared. "Funny how this ordinance appears the day after I move into the neighborhood," Marcus said, his voice steady but his jaw tight. Almost like it was designed for someone specific. Patricia's smile was razor-sharp. "The ordinance applies to everyone, Mr. Thompson, equally." But nothing about this felt equal, nothing about the way her eyes lingered on his weathered jeans and work boots, nothing about how she'd emphasized his name like it left a bad taste in her mouth, nothing about how the other residents had suddenly developed an interest in marina maintenance whenever he appeared. "The fine is $500 for the first offense," Patricia continued, scribbling on her clipboard with theatrical flourish. "Double that for each subsequent violation. The HOA takes community standards very seriously." Marcus looked around the marina, at the empty boat slips that cost more per month than most people's rent, at the clubhouse where he'd never been invited, at the waters where his grandfather had taught him to fish decades ago, long before these houses existed. $500, he repeated slowly. "For fishing in waters I have every legal right to access." "Had every right," Patricia corrected, "until the community voted. Democracy in action, Mr. Thompson." Democracy. The word tasted bitter on Marcus's tongue. He'd served his country in Iraq, built a successful construction business from nothing, raised 2 children who were now doctors. But to Patricia Wellington and her HOA army, he was still just an unwelcome presence disrupting their perfect view. "I'll contest this," Marcus said, packing up his fishing gear with deliberate calm. "In court, if necessary." Patricia's laugh echoed across the water like a bird of prey. "Good luck with that. Judge Morrison is a founding member of this community. He understands the importance of maintaining property values." Property values. The eternal excuse for keeping people like Marcus in their place. As he walked away, Marcus felt the weight of watching eyes from windows of houses that cost more than small businesses. He heard whispered conversations stopping mid-sentence as he passed. He saw curtains quickly drawn shut. But Patricia Wellington had made one critical mistake in her calculations. She had no idea who Marcus Thompson really was. She had no idea about the phone calls he could make, the resources at his disposal, or the kind of patience that came from building an empire from the ground up. She saw a black man with a fishing pole and assumed she held all the cards. She was about to learn that assumptions could be dangerous things. As Marcus climbed into his modest pickup truck, he looked back at the marina one last time. The water sparkled in the morning light, indifferent to human prejudice. But something had changed in those pristine waters. A storm was coming. And Patricia Wellington had just invited it to shore. The Willowbrook HOA meeting that Thursday night felt more like a tribunal than a community gathering. Marcus sat in the back row of the clubhouse, the only black face in a sea of pale, determined expressions. The air conditioning hummed, but the atmosphere was suffocating with unspoken tensions. Patricia Wellington commanded the room from behind a mahogany podium, her voice carrying the authority of someone born believing she was destined to lead. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're here to discuss the ongoing Marina situation." Marcus's situation, as if his existence required management. "Since implementing Ordinance 247, we've had continued violations," Patricia continued, her eyes finding Marcus in the crowd like a heat-seeking missile. "The same individual refuses to respect our community standards." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Mrs. Henderson from Maple Street whispered something to her husband. The Johnsons nodded gravely. Tom Bradley, who lived in the mansion next to the marina, raised his hand. "Perhaps we need stronger enforcement," Tom suggested, his voice carrying the weight of old money and older prejudices. "The current fines clearly aren't working." Marcus stood up slowly. The room fell silent, as if a predator had suddenly appeared among sheep. "I'd like to address the board." Patricia's smile could have cut glass. "Of course, Mr. Thompson, though I should remind you that only property owners in good standing may speak at HOA meetings." "My mortgage is current," Marcus replied evenly. "My property taxes are paid. I am very much in good standing." The silence stretched like a taut wire ready to snap. Finally, Patricia gestured toward the microphone with theatrical reluctance. "Please keep your comments brief." Marcus walked to the front of the room, feeling 50 pairs of eyes, tracking his movement. He stood at the microphone, looking out at faces that ranged from curious to hostile to afraid. "I moved to this neighborhood because I thought it represented something," he began, his voice steady. "Success, achievement, the American dream. I've worked 30 years to afford a home here. I served this country. I built a business that employs dozens of people." Some faces softened slightly. Others remained stone. "But apparently, none of that matters if I want to fish in waters that were public long before this development existed." His voice grew stronger. Ordinance 247 wasn't about aesthetics. It was about removing an unwanted presence. "That's absolutely untrue," Patricia interjected, though her flushed cheeks suggested otherwise. "This ordinance applies to everyone equally." "Then why?" Marcus asked, pulling a folder from under his arm. "Did I find this?" He held up a printed email chain. Communications between HOA board members discussing the Marcus problem. Messages about property values and maintaining community character. Language carefully coded but unmistakably clear in its intent. The room erupted. Voices rose in protest, denial, outrage. Patricia banged her gavel repeatedly, but the damage was done. The pretense of equality had been shattered. "How did you get private HOA communications?" Patricia demanded, her composure cracking like ice in spring. Marcus smiled for the first time that evening. "Public records request. Amazing what becomes available when you know where to look." But the emails were just the beginning. Over the following weeks, Marcus discovered layers of institutional bias woven into the very fabric of Willowbrook. The landscaping company was owned by a board member's son and had a strict cultural fit hiring policy. The security firm that patrolled their streets had instructions to pay special attention to certain residents. The Marina management company had received complaints about undesirable activities that needed addressing. Each revelation felt like another weight added to an already heavy burden. This wasn't just about fishing. This was about a systematic attempt to make him so uncomfortable that he'd sell and leave. But Patricia Wellington had fundamentally misunderstood her opponent. Marcus Thompson hadn't survived Iraq, but built a multi-million-dollar construction empire and raised 2 children as a single father by backing down from bullies. Every challenge had made him stronger. Every setback had taught him patience. Every victory had been earned through careful planning and relentless execution. While the HOA celebrated their legal victories, increasing fines, tightening ordinances, making his life progressively more difficult, Marcus was making phone calls. His construction company had connections throughout the region. His military service had created a network of successful veterans in various industries. His children's medical careers had introduced him to influential professionals. The harassment escalated. Parking enforcement suddenly became zealous about his truck. Code violations appeared for infractions that had been ignored for years. His mailbox was vandalized. Someone called the police about suspicious activity when he worked in his own garden. Each incident was documented. Each complaint was filed. Each injustice was carefully catalogued in preparation for something much larger than a simple fishing dispute. The breaking point came on a warm September evening. Marcus had decided to fish from his own property's shoreline, carefully staying within his legal boundaries. The sun was setting, painting the water gold and orange, when police cars arrived with sirens blazing. Officer Martinez approached with obvious reluctance. "Mr. Thompson, we received a complaint about trespassing." "On my own property?" Marcus asked, gesturing toward his house. "The caller claimed you were fishing from HOA property." Marcus pointed to the survey stakes he'd had professionally installed. "Those mark my property line. I'm 15 feet inside my own boundaries." But Patricia Wellington was already approaching with her ever-present clipboard and a group of neighbors in tow. Her face was flushed with triumph, as if she'd finally cornered her prey. "Officer, this man is clearly in violation of multiple ordinances," she announced loudly enough for the gathering crowd to hear. "He's been deliberately defying community standards for months." What happened next would later be remembered as the moment everything changed. Officer Martinez looked at the survey stakes, then at Patricia, then at Marcus. "Ma'am, he's on his own property. I can't arrest someone for fishing from their own shoreline." Patricia's face went crimson. "But the HOA ordinances clearly state—" "HOA ordinances don't supersede property rights," the officer said firmly. "Unless he's breaking actual law, there's nothing I can do." As the police cars pulled away, Patricia turned to Marcus with pure venom in her eyes. "You think you've won something here? This is just the beginning. We'll make your life so miserable you'll beg to sell." Marcus looked at her for a long moment, then at the crowd of neighbors who'd gathered to watch his humiliation. Their faces showed a mixture of disappointment and anger that their victory had been denied. "Mrs. Wellington," he said quietly, "you have no idea what you've just started." The threat in his voice was subtle but unmistakable. Patricia laughed it off, but something in Marcus's eyes made her take an involuntary step backward. As the crowd dispersed and darkness settled over the marina, Marcus remained by the water's edge. But he wasn't fishing anymore. He was planning. The revelation came on a Tuesday morning that would forever divide Marcus Thompson's life into before and after. He was reviewing construction contracts in his office when his attorney called with news that changed everything. Sarah Chen had been Marcus's lawyer for 15 years, helping him navigate business deals and legal challenges with the precision of a surgeon. But her voice that morning carried something Marcus had never heard before. Shock, so profound it bordered on disbelief. "Marcus, you need to sit down," Sarah said without preamble. "I've been digging into the Willowbrook development like you asked, and what I found, it's bigger than we thought." Marcus set down his coffee, already sensing that the conversation was about to shift the entire foundation of his understanding. "What did you find?" "The Marina, the whole Marina complex, the management company, the dock facilities, Vitoi. It's all for sale, has been for 6 months. Sarah's words came faster now, excitement building. "But here's the thing, the seller isn't some faceless corporation, it's owned by a company called Wellington Holdings." The name hit Marcus like a physical blow. Wellington, as in Patricia Wellington. Her late husband's family trust. Apparently, James Wellington developed the original Marina 30 years ago. When he died 5 years ago, control passed to Patricia, but she's been trying to liquidate assets quietly. The Marina is hemorrhaging money, maintenance costs are astronomical, insurance is through the roof, and they're barely breaking even. Marcus felt the world tilt beneath his feet. She owns the Marina. The same Marina she's trying to ban me from fishing at. "It gets better," Sarah continued, her voice taking on the predatory edge that made her such an effective attorney. "The HOA management contract for the Marina. Wellington Holdings gets a 20% commission on all fines and fees collected. Every time they fine you, she literally profits." The scope of the deception hit Marcus like a tsunami. This wasn't just about racism or keeping him out of the neighborhood. This was about money. Patricia Wellington had been using the HOA as a personal revenue stream, creating violations to generate income from the very Marina she owned. "How much are they asking for it?" Marcus asked, though his mind was already racing ahead to possibilities that seemed too perfect to be real. $12 million for the entire complex. Marina, docks, clubhouse, management contracts, everything. Sarah paused. "Marcus, I know that look in your voice. What are you thinking?" What Marcus was thinking was that Patricia Wellington had just made the most expensive mistake of her life. Thompson Construction wasn't just a local company. It was a carefully built empire spanning 3 states. Marcus had spent decades reinvesting profits, acquiring properties, building a network of subsidiary companies that most people never connected to him. His modest pickup truck and work clothes were carefully calculated to blend in, to avoid drawing attention to wealth that would make most of his neighbors nervous. The truth was that Marcus Thompson could buy the Marina without significantly impacting his financial position. But more importantly, he now understood the full scope of the war being waged against him. "Sarah, I want you to set up the purchase through a shell company, something that can't be traced back to me immediately. Can you do that?" "Marcus, what are you planning?" "Justice," he said simply. "Patricia Wellington wants to play games with ordinances and fines. She's about to learn that some games have consequences she never imagined." The purchase negotiations took 6 weeks, conducted through layers of corporate structures that would make the transaction virtually invisible until it was too late to stop. Marcus used a Delaware corporation owned by a Nevada LLC, which was in turn owned by a trust based in Wyoming. The paper trail was legal but deliberately complex, designed to obscure the true buyer until after the deal closed. During those 6 weeks, the harassment intensified. Patricia seemed to sense that time was running out, though she couldn't understand why. HOA meetings became increasingly hostile. New ordinances appeared almost weekly. Restrictions on dock usage, limitations on watercraft, regulations about noise levels that seemed targeted specifically at Marcus's activities. The final HOA meeting before the sale closed felt like a celebration of Patricia's anticipated victory. She stood at the podium, radiating triumph, announcing new partnerships with Marina management that would ensure community standards are maintained at the highest level. "I'm pleased to announce that the HOA has negotiated a new 5-year contract with Wellington Holdings for exclusive management of our Marina facilities," she declared to enthusiastic applause. "This partnership will give us unprecedented control over who uses our waters and how they're used." Marcus sat in his usual back row seat, watching Patricia bask in what she believed was her moment of ultimate victory. She had no idea that the contract she was celebrating had already been nullified by the sale that would close the following morning. "Furthermore," Patricia continued, her voice rising with excitement, "we've implemented a new membership fee structure for Marina access. Annual fees will be $4,000 for dock usage, with additional charges for fishing permits and recreational activities." The crowd erupted in applause. $4,000. A sum designed to be prohibitive for someone they assumed was barely scraping together HOA fees. Marcus stood up slowly, feeling all eyes turned toward him. The room fell silent, anticipating another futile protest. "Mrs. Wellington," he said, his voice carrying across the room with unusual calmness. "I have a question about these new membership fees." Patricia's smile was sharp as a blade. "Of course, Mr. Thompson. Though I should warn you that the fees are non-negotiable. Community standards require proper investment from all participants." "My question isn't about the amount," Marcus replied, reaching into his jacket pocket. "It's about who has the authority to collect them." He pulled out a folder and set it on the table at the front of the room. "Because as of tomorrow morning at 9 a.m., Wellington Holdings will no longer own or manage the Marina." The silence that followed was absolute, as if someone had sucked all the air from the room. Patricia's face went white. "What are you talking about?" Marcus opened. The closing took place at 9 a.m. sharp in the offices of Patterson Chen Associates. Marcus sat across from Patricia Wellington in a conference room that smelled of leather and old money, watching as 30 years of her family's legacy changed hands with the stroke of a pen. Patricia had arrived in full battle armor, designer suit, perfect makeup, the kind of confidence that came from never losing. But as Sarah Chen laid out document after document proving that the sale was legitimate, legal, and irreversible, cracks began to appear in her composure. "This is impossible," Patricia whispered, staring at the deed transfer. "Who would buy a failing marina for $12 million? Marcus leaned back in his chair, allowing himself a small smile. "Someone who understands the real value of waterfront property." But Patricia's shock turned to rage as the full implications hit her. This is you, isn't it? You're behind this somehow," Sarah Chen interrupted smoothly. "Mrs. Wellington, my client prefers to maintain privacy regarding his investment strategies. What matters is that the sale is complete and binding." The next 2 hours were a masterclass in legal dismantling. Every contract Patricia had negotiated, every exclusive agreement she'd arranged, every revenue stream she'd established, all null and void with the change of ownership. The HOA management contract she'd celebrated just days earlier was worthless paper, but the real devastation came when Marcus finally revealed his intentions. Effective immediately, he announced, the Marina will return to its original public access model. No membership fees, no fishing restrictions, no ordinances limiting public use of public waters. Patricia's face went crimson. "You can't do this. The property values, the community standards." "The community standards that included profiting from discriminatory enforcement?" "No," Marcus said, rising to his full height and looking directly into her eyes. "This is justice. There's a difference, though I understand why you might not recognize it." But Marcus wasn't finished. The Marina purchase was just the beginning of a transformation that would reshape the entire community. Within a week,
The fishing prohibited signs disappeared. The security guards who'd harassed residents were dismissed. The exclusive boat slip reservations that had kept out undesirable boat owners were opened to the public. More importantly, Marcus began implementing changes that went far beyond simple revenge. He established a community fishing program for underprivileged children. He created free boat safety courses. He opened the Marina clubhouse for community events that actually included the entire community. The response from Patricia and her allies was swift and vicious. They called emergency HOA meetings. They threatened lawsuits. They circulated petitions. They held protests outside Marcus's house. But their power base was crumbling. Other residents who'd been quietly intimidated by HOA overreach began speaking out. Neighbors who'd been afraid to challenge Patricia's authority found their voices. The carefully maintained facade of unity began to crack, revealing years of accumulated resentment. The final confrontation came on a Saturday afternoon in September, exactly 1 year after Marcus had first been fined for fishing. He was standing on the dock, watching his granddaughter cast her first line into the same waters where he'd been banned, when Patricia approached with a small group of supporters. "Are you satisfied now?" she demanded, her voice shaking with barely controlled fury. "You've destroyed everything we built here. Property values are plummeting. The community is divided. Outsiders are coming in like this is some kind of public park." Marcus L.
Patricia's last card was desperate and predictable. "Fine, you win, but you'll never really belong here. People will always see you as the angry black man who destroyed their neighborhood." The accusation hung in the air like poison, designed to hurt and diminish. But Marcus had faced that particular weapon too many times to be wounded by it anymore. "Patricia," he said quietly, "I don't need to belong to a community that defines belonging by who it keeps out. I'm building something better." As if to prove his point, his granddaughter squealed with delight as she pulled in her first fish. Other children gathered around to celebrate with her. White kids, black kids, Latino kids, Asian kids. Kids who would grow up thinking integration was normal, that public spaces belonged to everyone, that differences were meant to be celebrated rather than feared. Patricia Wellington stood frozen, watching her vision of exclusive perfection being replaced by something messier but infinitely more beautiful. The marina that had once been a symbol of segregation had become a symbol of possibility. She turned and walked away without another word, her supporters trailing behind like mourners at a funeral for the world they'd lost. Marcus remained at the dock, watching his granddaughter fish in waters that were finally, truly free. The sun set over Willowbrook Marina, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, while children's laughter echoed across the water. The war was over. Justice had won, but more importantly, healing could finally begin. 2 years later, Willowbrook Marina had become something Patricia Wellington never could have imagined in her worst nightmares, or her greatest dreams, if she'd possessed the vision to see beyond her own prejudices. The 4th of July celebration was in full swing. Families from across the region had gathered for what had become the area's mose, the ceremony. Marcus had been dreading and anticipating it in equal measure. The city was dedicating the new community centre in his honour, not for buying the marina, but for what he'd done with it afterward. The Marcus Thompson Community Centre would serve as a permanent reminder that justice was possible when ordinary people decided to take extraordinary action. As he walked toward the dedication platform, Marcus noticed familiar faces in the crowd. Former HOA members who'd initially opposed him but gradually come to understand that inclusion benefited everyone. Business owners who'd discovered that diversity was good for their bottom line. Children who'd learned to swim in waters that had once been forbidden to them. There was one face notably absent. Patricia Wellington had moved away 6 months earlier, selling her mansion to a young Latino family who'd fallen in love with the waterfront view. The new owners had turned the formal gardens into a playground where neighborhood kids gathered every afternoon. Mayor Jennifer Santos took the microphone, her voice carrying across the water. 2 years ago, this marina was a symbol of division. Today, it stands as proof that one person's courage can transform an entire community. Marcus felt the weight of all those eyes, all those expectations. When he took the microphone, he thought about everything that had brought him to this moment, the injustice that had sparked it all, the battles fought and won, the relationships healed and built. "I didn't buy this marina to get revenge," he said finally. "I bought it to prove a point, that public spaces belong to the public, that communities are stronger when everyone belongs, that justice isn't something that happens to us, it's something we create together." He looked out at the crowd, at faces that reflected the beautiful diversity he'd fought to protect. Some people ask to me why I didn't just find somewhere else to fish, why I didn't take the easy path and avoid the conflict. His voice grew stronger, because easy paths don't lead to justice, and justice delayed is justice denied. Not just for me, but for every child who deserved to learn that they belong in spaces others tried to keep from them. The applause was thunderous, but Marcus wasn't finished. Patricia Wellington thought she was protecting property values by keeping certain people out. What she didn't understand is that the most valuable thing any community can have is the knowledge that it welcomes everyone. As the ceremony concluded and families returned to their celebrations, Marcus walked back to his original fishing spot. The dock where he'd first been confronted, where this entire journey had begun. He cast his line into the water not because he particularly wanted to fish, but because he could. His phone buzzed with a text from his daughter. "Dad, watching the live stream from California, so proud of you. You didn't just buy a marina, you bought justice." Justice. The word still carried weight, but it felt different now. Less like a battle cry, and more like a quiet promise kept. A young black boy approached hesitantly, carrying a borrowed fishing rod. "Excuse me, sir, is it really okay for anyone to fish here?" Marcus smiled and made room on the dock. "Son, this water belongs to all of us, always has. Some people just forgot for a while." As the sun set over Willowbrook Marina, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, Marcus Thompson cast his line one more time into waters that were finally, completely, permanently free. The fish were biting. The community was healing. And justice, patient and persistent, had found its way home.